Hey everyone, and welcome to Cooking Companion TV. I'm Jenna Edwards, and this is a recipe demo of burnt honey and pistachio ice cream using goat milk or A2 milk and goat milk powder rather than cow milk and cow cream. The community took a poll, and this was one of two recipes we decided to demo, so give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and let's get right to it. I'll demo the burnt honey part first, and then I'll show you my custard ratio. If this is your first ice cream experience with me, I usually make it with all goat milk since cow milk isn't friendly to me, but you can use your usual milk or custard base if you have one you're comfortable with. There's only a slight variation of using less sugar. Burnt honey is just caramelized honey. We take half a cup of honey and heat it in a tall pot over medium heat and bring it to a bubbly boil. We want to sustain this for at least 5 minutes or up to 10 minutes. The longer you cook it, the deeper and more bitter the caramelization. If we were making caramel with sugar, we'd do this for nearly 18 minutes. This induction top doesn't maintain temperature for more than a few minutes. So here's my actual stove top when I made this the second time. This is how dark the honey got. The flavor of the honey does get amplified, so choose something you know you like. I think dark honeys will hold up better to the heat treatment, but use whatever you have easy access to. As another visual cue, here's how dark mine got against the purple spatula. Again, this is half a cup of honey, and it should smell like toasted marshmallows. We would have already made the custard, and the next step of the technique is to add the custard to the hot honey half a cup at a time with the heat off. We don't need to heat them together any more than they already are. This is my first batch of honey, so it's not that hot, but you want to be careful when adding the first scoop or two of the custard because the hot honey can splatter when adding the cooler custard. So take the time to whisk it all together before adding more custard. After a few scoops, you'll be able to pour all of it in there. I mostly used a whisk, but I did switch to a spatula to get into the corners of the pot to scoop up all that honey into the custard. Now it chills until it registers about 40 degrees. I generally let mine cool at room temperature for a few hours and then put it in the fridge overnight. I use a KitchenAid stand mixer ice cream bowl to churn my ice cream, but I think most machines have similar directions that add-ins are added towards the end of churning when the ice cream is mostly thickened. For the KitchenAid stand mixer, we know we're getting to the end of the churning when the paddle starts to catch and it makes a clicking sound. See how it kind of stops like this? This is when we add in the crushed pistachios. You'll add as much pistachios as your palate likes, but I recommend 1/3 of a cup if you used 3 cups of milk to make your custard. That's about 2 tablespoons of crushed pistachios per cup of milk you use in your base, but of course have more to sprinkle on top. Flavor-wise, I also think graham crackers would go really well with this. Because of the caramelized sugar, this ice cream will be looser than others. I messed up in my first batch and I used way too much sugar in the custard, so this is extremely thin, even though it's been churned. Just, yours shouldn't look like this. I mean, don't be alarmed if it does. It still kind of thickens up and creams into an ice cream. It'll still freeze up. It may melt quicker, so just be prepared. The custard for this recipe is a little different than your basic custard because it needs significantly less sugar than you'd normally use. For my custard recipe, I use a ratio based on how many cups of milk I'm using. So for 3 cups of milk, I'll use just 2 eggs or just the yolks. I've done it both ways. And whisk them together over low heat. If the heat is low enough, it doesn't cook the eggs. And then after a few minutes, you can gently turn up the heat incrementally as you stir in the sugar. For this recipe, we'll use 1 tablespoon of sugar for every cup of milk we're using. My regular custard recipe uses a 1/4 cup of sugar per cup of milk, and that's what I actually did on my first round of this recipe. It was way too sweet, and as you can see, it didn't really hold the freezing churn, and it was almost inedible. Then, because I'm using goat milk or A2 milk because of my lactose intolerance, I need goat milk powder as the cream substitute. I use 1 tablespoon of powder per cup of milk I'm using. It's clumpy, and I found that sifting it into the milk base gives me a much thicker, smoother custard. And this will gently cook on medium-low heat for about 10 minutes until it coats the back of a metal spoon. And if you run your finger or spatula through it, it stands, meaning it doesn't rush to fill in the gap. Now, as it cools, we add it to the caramelized honey. If you want to use cow milk and cream, I consulted 2 recipes that used a combination of milk, cream, and creme fraiche or milk powder. But David Leibovitz, who has an entire recipe book of ice cream, has a honey ice cream. It's not burnt honey, but it's just basic honey. He uses 1.5 cups of cream with 1.5 cups of milk and 5 egg yolks. I'm sure you can cut down on the number of egg yolks if you want. Now, the flavor of this was super unique. Caramelized honey is not something you see often, and it's quite a showstopper, especially if you have access to really great honey. I do think you need pistachio or graham crackers to balance out the bitterness of the honey. So I am curious how a dark chocolate might work in there, or even some flaky salt on top. I think you can get creative with the add-ins and the toppings. I definitely want to hear about what you do with this. That's it for this recipe demo of burnt honey and pistachio ice cream. Get the ingredient list below or at cookingcompaniontv.com/burnt honey ice cream. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe to this channel for more demos just like this. I'm Jenna Edwards, and thanks for watching.